I never thought much of my stepmom, not in a bad way, but she was always so distant and focused on her life. When she married my dad, I didn't expect us to become close. She was this beautiful, poised woman who seemed to always have it all together. I admired her from afar, respecting her boundaries and giving her space. But as time went on, something strange started to change between us. I found myself observing her more, noticing things I hadn't before. One day, I came back home earlier than usual. Dad was out of town for the weekend, and the house felt eerily quiet. I wandered through the house, not really expecting to find anyone until I heard faint noises coming from the stables out back. My stepmom loved horses, and she spent hours with her favorite mare. I wasn't sure what she was doing, so curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly made my way toward the stable. As I approached, I saw her standing there, gently running her fingers down the horse's side, her touch tender and soft. The way she looked at the horse was unlike anything I'd seen before. There was this calmness in her, but also something else, something deeper. I leaned against the stable wall, watching her from a distance, mesmerized by the connection she seemed to share with the horse. Her hand moved in slow, rhythmic strokes, her fingers tracing patterns along the horse's coat, her body swaying slightly with each breath. She didn't know I was there, but I couldn't pull my eyes away from her. Her hair fell around her face, framing her delicate features, and the way she moved. It was hypnotic. There was something so intimate about the way she touched the horse, like she was lost in her own world, unaware of anything else. I found myself growing more and more captivated by her, unable to shake the strange feeling building inside me. I must have made a noise because she suddenly looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, we just stared at each other, neither of us saying a word. There was a strange tension in the air, something unspoken between us. I felt my heart racing, unsure of what to do next. But then, she smiled softly, and something about that smile made the tension ease. "Didn't know you were home," she said, her voice smooth and calm. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just got back." She walked toward me, her hand still resting on the horse, her eyes never leaving mine. There was something different about her today, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She seemed warmer, more open, like the usual distance between us had disappeared. As she stood closer, I could feel the warmth of her body, the scent of her perfume mixing with the earthy smell of the stable. "You like horses?" she asked, her voice soft. "I guess. Never really thought about it," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. She took a step closer, reaching out and taking my hand, guiding it to the horse's neck. "Feel that?" she whispered. "How strong and calm they are. It's like they understand you without saying a word." Her hand rested over mine, her touch light but firm. The way she spoke, the way she looked at me, it was so intimate. Our hands pressed together against the horse's soft coat. I could feel the heat from her body, the soft brush of her hair against my arm, and it was doing things to me I didn't understand. Her eyes met mine again, and for a moment, everything else faded away. There was only her, standing so close, her hand still on mine. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The air between us was thick with tension, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind that made my skin tingle, my heart race, the kind that made me want to lean in closer, to touch her, to feel more. We stood like that for what felt like forever, neither of us moving, both of us caught in this strange, electric moment. And then, without warning, she took a step back, her eyes lingering on mine for a split second before she turned away. I felt the absence of her warmth immediately, and it left me feeling empty. "You should come out here more often," she said, her voice barely audible as she moved back to the horse, her hands once again stroking its mane. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process what had just happened between us. But I knew one thing. I wanted more. I wanted to feel her touch again, to stand that close to her, to be lost in that moment with her. I couldn't shake the feeling, couldn't get her out of my head. The days that followed were torture. Every time I saw her, every time we passed each other in the house, there was this unspoken thing between us. We never talked about that moment in the stable, but it was always there, hanging in the air between us, like a secret only we knew. And the more time passed, the more I found myself drawn to her, craving her attention, her touch, her presence. She started spending more time in the stables, and I found myself joining her more often. At first, we didn't say much, just worked side by side, brushing the horses, feeding them, cleaning the stalls. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was charged with something more. Every time our hands brushed, every time our eyes met, that same tension returned, stronger than before. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light over the stable, she turned to me, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. She stepped closer, her hand resting on my arm, her fingers trailing down to my hand. "You're different," she whispered, her voice low and husky. "I see it in the way you look at me." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "I don't know what you mean," I lied, though we both knew the truth. She smiled softly, that same knowing smile she'd given me in the stable the first time. "You know exactly what I mean," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And then, without warning, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine so lightly I almost thought I'd imagined it. But the sensation was real, and it sent a shockwave through my body. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat, and before I knew it, I was kissing her back, my hands finding their way to her waist, pulling her closer. Time seemed to slow down as we stood there, lost in each other, the world around us fading away. Her lips were soft and warm, her touch sending sparks through me with every movement. It felt like I'd been waiting for this moment forever, like everything had been leading up to this. We finally pulled away, both of us breathless, caught in the afterglow of the kiss. Neither of us said a word, but we didn't need to. Everything we felt, everything we wanted, was in that kiss, in the way our bodies pressed against each other, in the way our breaths mingled in the cool evening air. I didn't know where this would go, didn't know what it meant for us. But in that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was that I wanted more of her, more of these moments, more of this connection we shared. As we stood there, our breaths mingling in the cool evening air, something shifted between us. The tension that had been building for so long finally broke, and we both knew there was no going back. She looked up at me with those eyes so full of warmth and something deeper, something more intimate. Her hand gently squeezed mine, a silent invitation, and I didn't hesitate. I took her hand in mine, leading her out of the stable and back toward the house. Inside, the air felt different, charged with something electric. The quiet of the evening wrapped around us as we moved through the house together, our steps slow, deliberate. Every moment felt heightened, every glance, every touch sending sparks between us. We didn't say a word, but we didn't need to. There was this unspoken understanding between us now, a connection that had grown beyond what either of us could control. Once we reached the living room, she turned to me, her fingers tracing the outline of my jaw, her touch soft but full of intent. I pulled her closer, my arms wrapping around her waist, our bodies pressing together in a way that felt natural, like this was always meant to happen. She let out a soft sigh as I leaned in, brushing my lips against hers once more. The kiss, slow and tender at first, then deepening as the need between us grew. We moved together, our hands exploring each other's bodies, learning every curve, every line, every inch of skin. There was something so intoxicating about the way she responded to my touch, the way her body seemed to melt into mine. It wasn't just physical. There was something deeper, something that made every moment feel intimate, connected, like we were sharing more than just passion. She took my hand and led me to the couch, sitting down beside me, her legs curled up beneath her. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder as I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. We sat like that for a while, the quiet of the room enveloping us as we held each other, content in the simplicity of being together. It was the kind of moment that didn't need words, the kind of moment where just being close was enough. After a while, she tilted her head up to look at me, her fingers tracing light patterns along my arm. "This feels right," she whispered, her voice soft, almost hesitant. I nodded, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "It does," I agreed, my voice barely above a whisper. There was something so intimate in the way she looked at me, like she was seeing right through me, into parts of myself I didn't even realize were there. We kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment, taking our time. There was no rush, no need to hurry. We had all the time in the world, and we intended to use every second of it. Her lips were soft and sweet as we explored each other with a kind of tenderness I hadn't expected. It was as if every kiss, every touch, was a promise, a silent declaration of everything we felt but hadn't said. Eventually, we found our way to her bedroom. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, casting warm, golden light across the bed. She stood by the door for a moment, watching me, her eyes full of desire, but also something more: trust, vulnerability. I crossed the room to her, taking her face in my hands and kissing her deeply, passionately, letting her know with every touch how much I wanted her, how much this meant to me. We moved to the bed, our bodies coming together in a slow, deliberate dance, each touch, each kiss more intimate than the last. The world outside disappeared as we lost ourselves in each other, our connection growing deeper with every moment we spent together. There was something so raw, so real about the way we moved together, like we were learning each other in a way that went beyond the physical, like we were discovering parts of ourselves in each other. Afterward, we lay there together, our bodies entwined, her head resting on my chest as I stroked her hair. The silence between us was comfortable, full of the kind of quiet that only comes from truly understanding one another. I could feel her breathing slow as she relaxed against me, her body warm and soft in my arms. It felt right, natural, like this was where we were always meant to end up. She looked up at me after a while, her fingers tracing light circles on my chest. "I've never felt this way before," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not with anyone." I smiled down at her, brushing a kiss across her forehead. "Me neither," I whispered back. "But I'm glad it's with you." We spent the rest of the evening wrapped up in each other, talking, laughing, kissing, exploring every inch of each other's bodies like we couldn't get enough. It was as if the rest of the world had faded away, leaving just the two of us, lost in our own little bubble of warmth and connection. In the days that followed, things between us only grew more intense. We started spending more time together, finding excuses to touch, to kiss, to be close. We became inseparable, finding comfort in each other's arms, finding joy in the simplest moments, whether it was cooking together, sitting on the couch watching a movie, or just walking through the house hand in hand. We acted like a couple in every sense of the word, and it felt natural, like this was how things were always meant to be. We shared everything, the laughter, the secrets, the quiet moments that felt more intimate than words could ever express. Every day brought something new, a deeper connection, a stronger bond. We didn't talk about what we were, didn't put a label on it, but we didn't need to. We both knew what this was, what it meant. And the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I wanted this, how much I wanted her. She wasn't just my stepmom anymore. She was the woman I cared about, the woman I wanted to be with, the woman who had somehow become the most important person in my life. There was no denying it. We were a couple, in every sense of the word, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As the days turned into weeks, our relationship grew more intense, and the lines between what we were and what we used to be blurred completely. We moved in sync, understanding each other without needing words, finding comfort in the stolen glances, the brief touches. But there was always this lingering hunger between us, a need that had only deepened with time. We couldn't get enough of each other, and every moment we were apart felt like a lifetime. One evening, we found ourselves alone in the house again, the air between us thick with anticipation. She stood in front of me, her eyes locking with mine, and, without a word, she took my hand, leading me upstairs to her room. The door clicked shut behind us, and the tension in the air became palpable. I could feel my breathing quickening as she stepped closer, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending sparks through my entire body. She leaned in slowly, her lips barely brushing against mine, teasing, drawing me in with every breath. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space between us. Our bodies pressed together as we kissed with a kind of urgency we hadn't allowed ourselves before. Every touch, every kiss felt more intense, more meaningful, as if we were pouring everything we had into this moment, letting it build to something unstoppable. She whispered my name, her voice full of desire, and in that moment, it was like the world outside ceased to exist. There was only her, only us, tangled together in a whirlwind of passion and longing that had been building for so long. Her hands roamed my body, tracing every inch of my skin, while my own explored hers, memorizing every curve, every delicate line. It was overwhelming, the intensity of it all. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. As we moved together, our connection deepened, becoming something more than just physical. It was as if we were merging, our souls entwined in a way that made it impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other began. The intensity between us grew until it was almost too much to bear, and as we reached the climax of our desire, it felt like everything else in the world faded away, leaving just the two of us, lost in each other, in a moment that would linger long after the night had ended.